think the changes go back a bit further, but there's two major areas of change. I think one, which has affected a lot of the work that I do, sort of high burden diseases in low middle income countries, sort of malaria, schistosomiasis, other diseases that people don't hear of much, but kill a few 100,000 people every year. And before COVID, there was quite a large interest in addressing these. They're often called neglected tropical diseases for various reasons, but there were angel investors and people who wanted to put in some money to do good who would fund new technologies directed at these. Not on the basis that they'll make lots of money, because there's not much money in diseases of poor people, but on the basis that they would, get some return in feeling they've done good for humanity. This changed a lot during COVID. I mean, partly because the economy's gone down, but partly because a lot of people made money very, very quickly in biotech. They managed to produce very poor quality diagnostics, for instance, and obviously, the vaccines, genetic vaccines, and they made a lot of money very quickly. And this changed the way that people think about investing in this area. But it's a change that has been in motion for a lot longer. The last 20, 25 years has been this increased private sector interest in making money from these diseases, partly driven by technological capabilities, but it very much is brought in bigger companies, as you mentioned. They concentrate on very high profit margins and very heavily used products, or they have a lot of money to put behind changing the market in order to use their products. So global health has largely become like any other industry where you have a manufacturer who's manufacturing something that people may or may not need, but then works on the advertising and tries to convince people that they will need that product, as we saw during COVID. So it's in a way it's been corrupted by money, but it's the way that we organize companies, and companies are there to make money for their shareholders. And I think that the field has moved generally from trying to address high burden diseases and the things that shorten human lives, to primarily making a profit for the private sector entities that are involved. And that's a very big shift, but it's why we are where we are today.
Yes, and what we're seeing is the WHO receiving increasing investment from NGOs, the private sector, but that will be earmarked, that will be tagged for specific purposes. These purposes tend to involve either digital surveillance technologies involved in health or for pharmaceutical trials and testing. Can you talk about how that might alter the capacity of the WHO to act as an independent authority should there be a public health risk?
Yeah, originally the WHO was almost solely run or funded by countries. Now it's 194 member states, although the US has talked of withdrawing. Most of that money originally was core funding or assessed funding, which means countries give money, the WHO decides on the basis of the policies that are for the World Health Assembly, the countries, and on the basis of its own expertise on what is the highest disease burden, what is the most effective use of the funds, they would decide how to use this money to improve global health. This has changed in two ways. There's been a lot more private sector money come into the WHO from companies and from private individuals. Mr. Gates is an obvious example. And this is now about a quarter of the WHO's total funding. So the other change is with countries as well, and most of their money, along with all this private sector money, is now specified funding, which means that for 75% of the WHO budget, the WHO has to do exactly what the funder says. So they're a gun for hire, or they're almost a public-private partnership where they're taking a lot of public money, a bit of private money, but they're being directed on where to use it. And the countries that have been the biggest funders have been the countries with the very strong pharma sectors. The United States, Germany, which started Biotech and was a very big funder a few years ago. They technically still are, but they're mostly funding their own WHO biohub within Germany, which is really there to produce, for the benefit of the vaccine industry, and the United Kingdom, etc. So it's very, very heavily dominated by specified funding from private public entities that have very strong interest in pharma. So the WHO inevitably has shifted from trying to improve the things that we know make people live longer most effectively, which is better sanitation, better nutrition, etc., to these sort of commodity-based fixes, like vaccines particularly, where a manufacturer makes something for a problem and they use the WHO's influence to make that market as big as possible.